couple dollars. It's not even released. It's only $2,000. I think of the one that's gray. Well, no, you can buy a car with that. You can't buy a car with a car with no engine. And no transmission and no body. Maybe like a frame. Maybe that's the Hawaii, and that's the Hawaiian one that they're making. It's all like I call it Hawaii. No, it isn't. I call it. I just remember from the meeting, I gave him my heart when he threw it away. No, I keep dying. It was that thing with Jim. Oh, that was so well played.
Did you try it?
Still hit it. So,
it's an acquired taste. It really is stripped down.
You know, I kind of like it jiggly right now. You just kind of stress Jigglypuff. Oh, it gets so good. I listen to Minecraft.
No, there's something like oh, so they use QT? I didn't know they switched. I thought they were good at switch to QT. I didn't think they actually did.
Edward, why did you upbeat him like 3 times? I will take that. I got there. That's third. Which one's third? No, there's not. There's only one third. I've been doing times. It's someone at fourth too. Daniel fourth and I third. Oh, I'm third. I didn't know anyone. I was literally asking for Daniel. I didn't hear Daniel call anything.
Alright, who was fourth? Fourth.
Yeah. No, he said no. Don't change my name, please. Why would I not change your name? Let's see how many kills I got. I have my name. I didn't get any. My name has me behind it. That's just randomly all. So it's like something like a stutter that says. Maybe I'll try to do this right now.
Drop everything on you like that.
I know it's not much of that.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
A day.
Items on.
Oh, man.
Ready? Okay. Alright.
Don't spam your sleep while everyone's out of range. Darn it, who's been? Darn it, you gotta get awake now. No, I knew I didn't awake in the first place.
The sound.
I know, it's terrible. That's why I picked him. I like UC back. Oh my
God.
I honestly should have used Kirby. Why?
Oh, I have to leave. Alright guys, jump. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Is that the sound of Bud I hear? Yeah, you're welcome.
Nearly hit my fingers. Nearly.
Why did you charge it?
No.
Oh, has the game started?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm going in there.
Dude, you take that took so long. Yeah, because I was punching. I know.
I know.
Go here.
Me?
I like how you don't take two directions.
Right, yeah, it's you.
You have two, right?
No, I'm C now. I was C. It's gonna drain so hard. It's yours.
So where does
Oh, that's you. Your player first.
is why not?
I feel bad.
So what so who made the song that goes like that song from the middle?
Short ice cream. Yeah. That's the point.
Fuck yourself for 50 plus days.
I could have just killed Daniel. Then I was confused. I
would've
knew he was
made it.
asleep.
No, I would have not seen
I would have made it.
Oh.
So
Stop doing that.
Buddy, I just sucked.
I had this last
will look on
This
this
is like
one.
my
It
fat
will look
thumb.
on this
I will make it work.
Like April.
Yes, that's cool. It's so hard right here.
Oh, yeah.
Boy! Daniel, why did you cheat? She's so good.
Now you can do it. Now you can make it. Just hit it right here.
Can you like slightly curve it that way?
What?
A little bit more.
Oh! The ultimate charge.
Oh, I'm so close.
Stop doing that!
Drained
No.
so bad.
Please. Don't
Drain
go
it.
this fine.
Drain it. See y'all.
You stole my kill. How dare you? Daddy.
Everybody, clap your hands. Why would you do this?
Fine.
Spaghetti.
Right.
Spaghetti. Oh, no!
No, actually mine. Can you the dead wall for once?
This is the dead one now.
They're both the dead wall. It will work.
You have to hit right.
One day.
You have to hit right here.
Yeah.
No.
And
No.
Every
Hit it right
time.
here.
always
Hit it right here.
I did hit it right there. I actually did it.
Perfect shot. New high score.
I'm really like right here now.
Not exploded.
Hey.
It doesn't look like it's exploded. Oh, you're kidding!
What do you have? Ah.
You have a U.
No!
Abracadabra.
Oh!
Got third.
All of them.
Gave you my controller. It's right here.
No.
I didn't just like have my controller and hope you forget.
Hey.
I actually thought you did.
Someone stop that.
Why do you always saw me totally that?
I mean, like,
I got so many kills that round.
Whoa,
You mad skills.
No, not
Made it.
See?
wait
I
for
like
the
that.
skill.
Wait,
Really good.
we don't have to. Well, wait, it's 6:53. So yeah, we're good. Just don't pick 10 back.
I was so.
Alright, I got 3 play.
Got it.
No, I got this.
Oh no. Everyone is.
Jump to the back of the pack.
They're all
Just
coming.
fifth place. Just fifth place.
Nobody can call that. It's controller. Boy, you don't use my name. Unless you kill people with it. You're good. No, I thought I was already hit someone.
Perfect.
But it's my Stop getting in the sides, damn it.
No, it's so far.
Because they touch your Nothing happens, they go gigabyte of RAM. They touch your
There you go.
Like 200.
Oh my god, it's.
That boy, Junior.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know all these things before you play. Something.
Yeah, whatever games you want. The IU. The UI, not the I don't know about you, Bryce, but do you use only 62 megabytes of memory? No, dang it. I do.
I don't even have memory. Lucky.
Your phone doesn't have memory.
No, me. I don't have memory.
Dude, I was texting Alexis about
Ah!
sorry, memory.
How did I miss that?
you sure
Hey,
about that?
Jigglypuff, you want to take a nap? And they're really fun to nap.
No, run!
Oh, I do. No.
No.
How do you like your projectiles in your face? How do you like that now? Mr. Projectile from across the stage, man.
Boy.
Oh, wow, that was explosive.
Are you talking about Metroid?
Oh, wow, that was explosive.
Worst character in the game.
Metroid's not a player.
Yeah, that's a name. I mixed up the name because.
Although I would love it if they would add a Metroid to
Called
the
Force.
next one.
That'd be funny.
They added Ridley.
You call Force? Yeah. Okay. No, run!
I'm gonna take the big people. Every Wednesday,
I've never
I'll
actually
take
beaten
the
a
big people.
Samus game. I played the one where it's actually a map on here where it has a little alien monster and some sights inside. No, I just called it Samus game. Care? I'll call it what I want to call it.
You mean Spanish, right?
Either. It is Spanish. Say that. It's Spanish. Hey, watch out, there's a bomb there. Boom! I like bombs. Oh, you got slapped between frying pans. Spaghetti. You were frying pans. I like how you just win with only throwing the items.
Oh, no!
Dude, he's like the best character in the game. You know his C-stick with the hammers is. No, I know, but all he was doing was throwing items. He's throwing the bacon. No, he was throwing the wand instead of using it. Yeah, yes. He was hoping to get something in your mind. I love the one where he sets stuff on fire with the match. It's so neat. I don't actually use him. I just get ready to run. Dude, he's amazing. You should use him. It's so hard to use him because he's like get the bunny ears, get the bunny ears. He's not like a smooth animation, and so it makes me like go crazy, and it drives me insane because it's like so friendly.
You just do that uppercut.
Dude, have you ever played Game & Watch? No.
Somewhere.
You've never played on the freaking Game & Watch console, dude?
Dude, who has?
No one.
I don't know.
Do you have one?
California Collectibles. I don't have one. If I had one, I would sell it. With this dude at California
Oh,
Collectibles.
dude, I actually got a lot of kills that game. I got like one at Zelda. One kill the entire game. That time I got
Because I
5.
fell off every time. I call 4.
I call third.
Alright, I think this is gonna be last round. Man. Play.
Dude, I forgot to call fourth and third.
Are we
for the past
playing
2
Legends of Chairs?
Could be. There's no girl leader, so this might actually work out.
Any girls?
There doesn't appear to be. We scared them off.
Oh my gosh.
Mission accomplished.
Wouldn't that mean all of us would die though?
What? How does that correlate?
You know, like
No, we wouldn't die.
Oh, there goes.
They're just.
Here goes.
Wait, why are we talking about civilization now?
What? How?
I heard the word
I don't really gotta
civilization.
think about this.
Just play one big game.
See ya!
We
Woo!
could survive only for a limited amount of time.
Well, yeah, we couldn't have children, so.
Guys, you know girls are talking about boy stuff tonight.
What does that mean?
Girl.
When you don't know what you say, but
Hey man, when something like that, you just think of me. I feel comfort.
I don't feel comfortable.
Hey, whoever threw that pizza, baby.
It's just boys.
Oh, I finally got it.
Hey. Whoever threw that pizza, baby.
Boys.
Why is there another Rachel?
I know.
I
Guys, just keep shelling it.
Boy.
don't even know how beats are live.
You will die by the time of Game and Watch Bacon.
You wanna watch Sicko Mode or Mo Mama?
I like
Tail,
you guys
who
are
are
like,
I legit have that.
Oh no.
Take the hammer.
You wanna watch Sicko Mode or Mo Mama?
Yeah, you wish you would do it, 'cause you're not
I got a Goldeen. My dying Pokemon is a Goldeen.
What? You have a Goldeen? Goldeen. It's not that half bad, actually.
No.
Not
It's
that
very bad.
What is that?
If you evolve it into Seed, it's better. Because it can learn that Horde Drill move, which like kills you in one hit.
Sent to the masses.
Oh, I totally tried
Oh, I
to
almost had
did
you.
nothing happens.
Kill blue onion.
Roll the items.
Go ahead. Shoot it.
Do it. Just sit, man.
Yeah, just go for it.
Yeah, but then there's controller right there.
Yeah.
We're not playing another round.
So it's obviously take
No,
off.
take it.
I win.
Why can't you make sure everyone knows when they have to pay? It's like, obviously.
I wonder if I have buddies. Wouldn't mind something, right?
You know what's funny as far somehow in this yours seems to be very powerful.
I need something.
Even though it's a fire emblem though,
tonight,
he's like the crappiest character in the entire world.
I don't want to be person.
Oh, that's all that we want.
No, oh, that. Seriously, be a bully boy.
I gotta win this. Boba Fett.
Dang it.
Boba Fett. He is
Oh
just
my
Boba
not
Fett.
even
was it like
fair.
Boba Fett that
No, he's like Boba Fett. He's not even fair at Pokemon because he's like level 12 and he has like 200 health and
you can't explain this stuff to me. I
it's
don't
not.
understand. I just don't. I
So he does have
understand
such terrible attacks.
many universities, not Pokemon.
That's because you're lame.
That's true.
No, I might just like plus $1 in like my phone. or
Dude, if you have
something.
$1, you can buy me something.
Dude, why?
All I have is this random piece of paper.
Oh, where's Alex when you need him? Oh, right. He's too busy
Wait, what's he
being
doing?
flooded.
Wait, he's flooded?
Yeah.
Oh, exercise. Thank you.
See, that's how the goldfish thing came up.
Well, hey, don't worry. The Paradise Lake is also nearly flooded.
It is?
Yep.
Well, I hope it doesn't.
No, right. No, right. Dang
Wait,
it.
Wait, it's actually flooded?
It
Why?
probably is. It's like in
How?
between.
You mean it's a floody boy?
Articuno for the win.
Articuno's
Is that
amazing.
it right next to Paradise Lake?
So, however, I feel like Zapdos better because of
Yeah,
fire and it
it's
can take out the
not
entire
really
elite
Like,
four.
my dad's house is right next to Paradise Lake.
All right, boys. Let's do
I have a 24 cent.
So wait, right next to the right next to the dam, right?
Well, what is?
There's no chairs?
Yeah.
You gotta teach you guys how to be ushers. Who's an usher in the S team?
I was, and then I
Anyone?
I used to
Anyone
be
a
a
deacon?
deacon.
Anyone a deacon this year? Nate's a
I
deacon?
was.
Alright. You're an usher? Okay, grab a screwdriver out of the little pen holder over here.
I have a screwdriver.
That's what he's gonna say.
Make sure it's a good, normal 2 Phillips.
Here, I got a screwdriver.
Yeah.
Number 2
No,
Phillips?
not.
Good.
I actually have 3 screwdrivers. You guys have one Phillips?
What do you carry around? Like
Drugs. You ever know when you're gonna get drugged? You're gonna get drugs. And you're gonna be like, you need to prepare.
Someone must be like, hey, bro.
You can have it. I don't even care. Here, you want some
Big
more?
Bibble is now mine.
What the heck? Yeah.
I have 21, 20 cents. You're welcome.
My sister, she'll go.
Wow. I did it.
She's not right
My
now.
life story.
I couldn't stop.
And this thing I'll get on Wednesday.
Wait, wouldn't his sister suck?
What?
Suck what?
Really? You should say that.
Well, I mean, did I really say it? I mean, is it on record?
Oh,
I didn't say anything. Am I recording you or not?
Shut up, Jacinda. Your sister texts you. Feels bad.
Isn't she in church?
You know, I think this chair is
Okay,
actually
someone
the next,
needs my phone.
legend, like ultimate something
On
chairs.
the bottom face.
Me?
Well, no, it actually was.
I got it.
No, it was
I
on
get
the
it.
bottom face down.
Dude, my dad's phone just been
Hey. Someone move the phone. Mine was on the bottom face down.
Stop moving the
There was
phone.
no doubt about it.
Hey, what was that?
What?
Ooh, it's like this, you know, girlfriend.
Was that your girlfriend who texted you?
Stop picking your butt. No, he was picking
Hey,
his
I had
butt.
to readjust the
He was
butt.
like way up in here. He's like way
No, I was getting my underwear on my butt. Chill
I
out.
don't like
you're
elastic
way up
on my
here.
butt.
You're like way up in your butt
Dion,
crack.
you're wearing two hats. You can't talk.
I was just about to say that.
You're wearing a cheerleader hat.
No, it isn't.
True.
Yes, it is. That's the type of fabric that they have on their
I
hats.
know they do.
Do you,
They have
do you
that.
realize that like type of fabric is not?
I was gonna
Yeah.
say.
No,
Yeah, no, it
Yeah,
isn't.
like
It is.
cheese fabric
No.
for cheese people.
No.
Everyone knows that.
Shut up.
no, because otherwise men's exercise equipment would just be called leggings.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Get
Get
out
out
of
of
here.
here.
Grab a chair.
Are we doing legends?
My dad beat me with skills. Hey,
I'm
Nick,
just
what's that scar on your head? Oh, my dad beat me with
Like
skills.
this, it's a Skittles commercial. Hello, remember we're playing Legends of Chairs.
Right, no, sit over here. What? So that we.
Oh,
I told you doesn't be a savage.
Slightly.
I came here because I thought I could lead worship, but then Isaac was
This is how popular tonight.
A good time.
yeah.
It's the side.
Hey, buddy.
All right, tonight we will be playing psychiatrist.
Yes! I love that game.
So I need a psychiatrist.
What is
The
that?
I
psychiatrist.
volunteer as tribute.
Are you raising here to find out what it is, or to
No,
be
no,
one?
I'm raising a B one.
But do you know what it is?
No, but
Don't raise your hand.
I want to be one.
You,
I
he
did
wouldn't
that
make
once,
a good
actually.
psychiatrist.
So when I was in junior high, okay, had a huge crush on Emily, but it was like a secret. At least I thought it was a secret. I wrote her like an
It was
anonymous love
obvious.
letter, and my sister was her best friend. So it was like a terrible, well, not best friend, but like they were close. So it was like a terrible idea to like write your sister's friend an anonymous love letter, because then she gets the letter in the mail and opens it, and my sister's at her house. And so like she's reading an anonymous love letter from me, and my sister's there. And so like my sister sees the handwriting and goes, "Oh, is that from Daniel?" She's like, "What? No, it's anonymous." Which, actually, yeah, I think it's from Daniel. So I go to her birthday party and they play psychiatrist, and I've never even heard of psychiatrist. And they're like, you know, trying to explain the game. I'm just like, "I'll be it." And they're like, "Okay." So they let me be it, and I've never played before. I've never seen the game played before, and so I just fail like mighty hard. It is almost impossible to be psychiatrist and win if you've not seen the game played.
yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, I'm not trying to say you're not going to do well because I don't think you're smart enough. Like, because most people aren't capable of doing well at something they haven't seen done.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you're going to fail. All right, so who has seen it played and would like to be it? I would really go with
want
you.
to fail.
I think
You
Hunter
want
wants
to
it.
fail.
I think he wants it
No
more.
one, no
he
one
wants it
ever
more.
succeeds.
I will fight him to his
That's not
death
true.
for it.
No one ever succeeded.
Not with me. No one ever
No,
succeeds.
like I think Caleb and Andrew have succeeded.
Yeah, they were leaders.
Oh, I see what you're getting at there. All right.
And they were. And I was just about to say they were smart, but then I was.
He was
Okay.
looking in the window. He was looking in the
Oh,
window.
wow.
Is he seriously
He
peeking?
carries a
He
can
was.
opener.
He was.
Sneaky McSneakerson. Okay, so let's do one he can actually figure out then.
What? No, we can't be nice about it. No one else ever
This is
does
the
that.
reason. This is why no one ever wins.
It's gonna be
Is because you guys are like, nah. That'd be,
Daniel.
he'd actually get
Yeah,
that.
we're all Elmo.
Trying to be a distant figure from the
Yeah,
That
we're all
doesn't even
Elmo.
begin to make
I agree,
sense.
David.
Let's be
And
Hey, guys,
also-
shut up. I want to hear.
We're not being Elmo. That is
What?
dumbest. Absolutely dumbest.
Patrick.
Let me handle this. That idea is just the worst.
It's the best.
All right, so the idea is we all
wanna be-
pick something that's wrong with us, and we all agree on that thing that is wrong with us, and it alters the way we answer questions.
We're drug
It
dealers.
makes it so that the yes and no answers we give him won't match up with reality all the time.
Wait.
Sometimes-
So say that again.
so like we're all
Shut
gonna
up, Nathan. I'm gonna come with and beat the crap out of you.
so we're all gonna pick
You
something
wish
that's
you
wrong
would
with
hurt
us.
your fist.
Okay, and it's not gonna be like a real thing a psychiatrist would have to figure out, like, oh, you're schizophrenic.
We're all autistic.
No, see, it's not like that. It's not like a
Oh.
real disorder. It's not like a real anything wrong with us. It's totally made up for the game.
Let's all
So
be
it's like
beyond that.
it's like we all think we're the person to our right.
I'm just gonna go over here and put you on your chair real
Okay,
quick.
there we go. Yeah, get it out of your system. Okay, so
It was worth it. It was worth the.
you keep believing that. All right, so we like a simple one. We all think we're the guy to our right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like he thinks he's him, you think you're him, she thinks she's you, He thinks she's hurt, like so on and so on and so on.
So
Everyone,
he
Yeah, but
has
that's
to talk
that's
about
like a simple one. No. Only gonna change the answers to yes or no questions. You don't actually act like them. You don't talk like them.
Yeah.
It's just yes or no questions. So just like when he says, you know, do you have short hair? You would say,
No.
does it make sense?
Okay.
So you don't like talk like him. You don't act like him. You just answer the question like him.
Okay.
All right. So that's not necessarily what we're gonna do though.
There's one thing.
Yeah. Oh, and if you get it wrong. So like, what if he does this? What if he's like, do you have a dog at home? And you're like, how the heck do I know that? I don't know what he has at home. So you just guess. Okay. And if you get it wrong, then he calls you on it.
I'm a cat.
Does that make sense?
Tell you.
But likewise, it might not always be the guy to your right. It might be like the guy holding the Skittles.
He's
You know what I mean?
Fine.
For realsies. Oh, wait, no, that's not him. That's not him.
Oh.
Please come in. Please. You guys are all accusing.
I also
Hey,
have
Daniel, we almost
Another
scared them away
Phillips
for a
said
little while.
Yeah, what?
We almost scared them away for a little
Oh, good. Good. I'm glad to hear it. That chair's actually empty if you want it.
That small, like a flathead maybe, but
Okay, so you get kind of the idea, like you answer like you're something else based on the thing we decide on.
Yeah, I
So, okay, so we need a good thing to decide on then.
We just know what we discussed.
We're
You
all
wanna do
Barney.
one?
We're all Barney.
No.
This
Oh my
is
god,
terrible.
that was not any better than Elmo.
Let's not all be a fictional
Barney is
character.
so good for living.
It is the
Wait, I like that.
Let's all be Lightning McQueen.
Barney's
That is a
Nope,
fictional
that is
character.
still a fictional character.
Barney.
We'll all be.
Literally terrified.
Okay. All right. All right.
Literally.
All right. This is
Actually terrifying.
a little harder, but I think just barely. I think Hunter could get this one. Okay. This one is also a little tricky for you guys. So you gotta really pay attention, or else you're gonna mess it up hardcore. Okay. We are the person he last asked a question of. We are the
That's
person
not
he
fair.
last asked a question of. So if
So
he
now we
asked
have
down
to
the line,
So if
And
we
the-
ask you again,
no, pay attention. There's two caveats. Okay, there's two catches. So first person is weird. First person will be
I
Hunter.
get it.
Does that make sense? First person is gonna be Hunter. Okay. Then as soon as we move on, so like he asked you the first question, let's just
What
say.
if you ask me twice?
I'm getting there.
Then do I
I'm
answer
getting there.
about
I'm getting there. I'm
myself?
getting there. I'm getting there. So first question goes to you. And it's like you're Hunter. So you answer whatever the answer would be for Hunter, right? Okay.
I'm sure.
Okay. Cool. Then he asks you, and then you would be him. Then he asks you, and then you would
Man,
be
you'd be a
him.
pretty good looking guy.
But then if he goes back and he asks you, you got to pay attention because like then you're him.
Yeah.
You're whoever he asked last.
And
And Nathan did figure it out. If he asks you two questions in a row, the first one you're that last person, but the second one you're yourself. So if he sits there and asks you like three questions in a row, most of them are actually going to just be about you.
Are you white?
Does it make sense?
Are
'Cause it's
you
whoever he
white?
asked-
No. Are you non-binary? Yes.
Well, no, the best one is this, where he goes like down the line. And he's like, "Are you white? Yes. Are you white? Yes. Are you white?" And then you'd say yes, but then you'd be like, "Wait, what? Are you white?" And then you'd say no.
No.
It's gonna be good. It's gonna be good.
Are you white? Yes. Are you white?
All right.
No.
Better be good as the original.
All right. So
Are you
remember,
black? No.
remember,
Are you
if
black?
someone
Yes.
if someone gets one wrong, you gotta say psychiatrist if you know that they were wrong. Okay? And if we get two psychiatrists, like someone confirms them, then we go ahead and we just all get up and find a new chair.
oh
You guys
shit,
aren't
she's
listening.
confused.
Good job. That's good to say. It's a good thing to say when you're confused. So we're playing a
Can I
game.
try to explain it?
Hunter is outside the room. Hunter doesn't know what we're discussing right now.
Exactly.
So yeah. So Hunter's gonna come back in and he's gonna start asking yes or no questions from everyone, and he has to try and figure out this. We all think we're the person he last asked a question of. That's the one thing he has to figure out. Now we can't give hints. We can't answer blue or I have cats at home. We can only answer yes or no,
And he has to ask
and that's it. So he has to come up with the questions, try and figure out that we all think we're the person he last asked a question of. That's it. You just answer yes or no questions. Pay attention to who he's talking to in what order, so you know who to answer for. Okay, you guys ready? Yes.
So I just had
Yes.
an interesting strategy. If you were the psychiatrist, couldn't you ask something that only the person?
Yes.
It's like I could ask, do you have two cats?
Yes.
And then someone else answered incorrectly because they didn't know, then like let's say Jaden was who we were all, Jaden would have to say psychiatrist.
Yes.
Which would make it very obvious.
Yes.
Yeah, you're
that
right,
he was.
But the psychiatrist never pays attention to that, so you should when you're the psychiatrist.
Ooh.
If you know who says psychiatrist he's saying, then you know who already knew the truth of the answer
Or you could just give
to
your
the
buddy
question you
half
asked.
until
So you can deduce who the answer
He's getting Hunter.
thought they were.
He's getting Hunter.
My dream job.
Everyone.
Bryce, that's called a meta.
What?
That's called a meta.
Come on, bro.
What's up, my brother?
Diagnose us, please.
Doctor, we have very limited time,
I have schizophrenia.
so we've decided on the group session today. We're hoping you can help us out. We've only got 5 minutes for you to help us.
We all have the same vibe.
So we're fairly certain we all have the same problem.
What's up, dog?
Are you what? We're all different.
Yes, we like all different names.
Are you human?
Yes. No, everyone gets annoyed. Yes.
I think that's fairly conclusive.
I don't know, ask him, he
Are
might
you
not
happy?
be human. Ask me, I'm definitely not human.
Go.
Take another question.
Do I have pants on?
Yes.
well, wait. Do you have pants on? Is that the question you're asking?
Well, yeah. Do you have?
Because you said, do I have pants on?
Yes, I have pants.
I sure
Yes,
hope
you
so,
have pants
Hunter.
I
Do
can
you
see
have
them.
a sweatshirt on? No. Wait.
Psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist.
Hi, everybody, find a new chair. Hey, but you know what? It's okay.
No.
Okay. It's okay. It's okay because you figured it out. When you get one wrong, we all switch seats to mess them up. That's it. Okay? You can move a chair if you want to.
Oh, hi, Howard. I have Jesus.
But it's
I am
okay.
a
You figured out what you did wrong like as soon as you did it. So you're fine.
Respect Jesus.
So in case you were wondering, the answer was yes. I guess what you? What is that? What?
You have a hat on.
Clubhouse.
You have a hat on.
No.
You have a hat on. You have a hat on.
You should keep going until you actually get to someone who has a hat. Let's just.
Do you have a hat on?
No.
Can you stop licking your lips?
Oh, man, it's kind of
You
satisfying.
should ask a few more people.
Wait a second. It's like, wait.
Just do it.
Yes. Jello chili.
He is tripping. Wait, ask him the black question. Wait.
No. The hat one's pretty good. He's already doing good with the hat one.
Black question.
Wait.
Ask him again.
Do you have a hat on?
No.
Now ask him.
Do you have a hat on?
Yes.
Wait, ask me, I don't remember. Hey!
Do you have a hat on?
That makes me happier.
No.
What more?
No, it's good. It's good.
You know what? Is this something?
Do you have a hat on? No. Do you have a hat on?
Something unscrewed.
Ask Jonathan.
Do you have a hat on?
No.
Do you have a hat on?
No.
Oh, it's like
Psychiatrist.
Oh, it's supposed to be yes.
What?
It was supposed to be yes.
No, just say it.
What's happening?
Say it. Ask him again. Ask again.
Oh man, if you'd asked Jonathan,
Ask again.
Oh, it's so good.
Do you have a hat on?
Psychiatrist.
No, it was a no. It was a no.
He's the psychiatrist.
My boy.
Dude, who do you talk to last?
You talked to him last.
No, we
Okay,
didn't.
okay.
No.
Yes.
Just let him think that. Just let him think that, guys.
It's fine.
Anyways, whatever. Go.
He's not a
That's what a
psychiatrist.
psychiatrist is.
He's people.
Do I have a hat on?
They have
No.
very
No.
strong
Do you have a hat on?
intellect.
Yes. He plays Fortnite.
No, I don't have a hat on.
Are
He
you
didn't ask
the
he didn't ask
person
you.
that I asked before you?
Yeah.
Yay!
Well done. Well done. Okay.
I want to be psychiatrist.
Can I be psychiatrist?
Psyche.
Actually, I do not want to be
Psychiatric.
I want to be the
Is that like the Japanese one, the Psyche Kai?
Psychiatrist.
Alright guys, don't stop. It's
Can
not
I be
fair.
the psychiatrist?
It's not serious.
Who think they were all elephants, apparently.
I want to be psychiatrist. Psychiatrist.
No, like the kids down there.
Psychiatrist.
Were elephants.
I want to be psychiatrist.
Jaden, you had your hand up first round.
Yeah!
No!
Yay!
Yeah!
Yeah.
You have no hope.
get out of that chair.
Andrew, a seat just opened up. We voted Jaden off the island.
No, take the odd seat.
And
Come
this seat is open up for you, right?
on. No.
No.
Psychiatrist! He didn't take the hit. Hey, don't stomp
I
on the
took
ground.
it. I got it.
I was like, get up and move. You know?
Yeah, that was the wrong
It's a
answer.
good joke.
That
I
was the
thought,
wrong
I
answer.
thought it was a good joke.
You should
Alright,
have
well,
asked
It's
me.
alright. No,
You
you're
should have asked
good.
me
I really
if I
have to
should
do
get
it.
after you. I would have said no. Then you should ask
Alright,
me.
alright. Okay.
Do what
So
you
I
do
have-
to Nathan. Just
I have a
pull it
special
out.
one. I have a special one in honor of Jaden, and this is gonna be a little hard to explain. You gotta pay attention, okay? This is in honor of Jaden. What we're gonna do is we're gonna do a pass game. Pass game happens sometimes like a leg cross, where like no one in the room is allowed to have their legs crossed except for one person, and then like you blink at each other, and then that transfers the leg cross. We're actually gonna do something special. We're gonna do Italian hands. Italian hands. So there's only one person in the room that has to keep their hand with all 5 digits
They should
touching.
do it to me. I could
Okay.
act like I'm picking something out.
But I could go like
Okay, so like, no, you can't hide it. You gotta like, not behind your back, but like, you can hide it a little bit. You can play with your hand, you know, just like kind of fidget with your fingernails, like, just make it seem like there's some other reason you have all 5 digits.
Or
touching.
just do this
Okay,
consistently.
but there's only one. There's only,
That would be kind of weird.
there's only one person in the room at a time.
I got you.
There's only one person in the room at a time. Now, the reason you have to keep it visible, guys, is because everyone else of us has to know who the heck it is. You do it. So if you hide it behind your back, no one knows who they're acting like.
I am
Okay?
Italian. No.
So we're all the person with their hand in an Italian hand. But then to pass it, you're gonna wink. Okay? So you gotta be the person who has Italian hand, and then you make eye contact with someone in the circle. And as soon as you make eye contact, you can then wink at them,
Be like,
and they'll wink back, so they know like
it's like
they're showing they got it. And then you watch their hands, and when they put their hand in Italian hand, then you stop. You take your hand out of Italian hand posture. Then now we all think we're that new person. So we really got to pay attention to who actually has their hand like that. Don't hide it too well, or no one will know who to answer as. Likewise, if you're the person with Italian hands, you got to be listening to every single answer, because usually you're the only one who knows the right answers to the questions, right? You got to call psychiatrist to get it wrong. Yeah.
Can I be the first one to have?
You want to be the Italian
yes.
starter?
No, I want to be the
Yes.
Italian.
Can I would like
You would like to be the starter. We're going to
Oh my
pass it
God,
around,
do I
guys.
have to
Lots
say
of people
to
are going to
the
get to be
Alright, so
the
please
Italian
don't
hand
me.
holder person. What? You want to start as well? You guys are ridiculous.
Can I please start too?
This is
Hey,
silly.
What about me? I say me because I.
I'm going to give it to Zane. Zane, you
What
get to
about the
start
part that was
Italian
raising
hands.
the white hand?
You're doing
Does
good.
that not mean anything?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it's because he's white. It's because he's white.
Okay, shush.
I am just about to.
Don't
Shush. Wow. Shush.
How's your day?
How's your day going, brother?
Come on in, my brother.
My day is it?
Who's that?
I don't know. You
I wasn't
Why'd
asking
you ask
about
Daniel about
What
Jaden?
Daniel, give me my drink.
Jaden
Yes.
taking his time.
Thank you. What is Jaden doing?
Don't leave it on the ground, because then
He's
switch
slowly
chairs.
Come
meandering.
on,
Kick
Jaden.
it over so fast.
What is Jaden?
My
Hey,
God,
you
you
have
have
no
no
hope.
I'm so glad you're here. It's been at least 10 minutes since our last group session, and we already need more therapy.
Wow.
You had your
Please
chance,
don't
That's
pee
Jaden.
too
right
bad.
now.
Doctors don't get to pee. The first thing you learn in medicine.
Wait, what?
You like pickles?
Heck yeah.
My bad. You like pickles?
Yeah.
You like pickles?
He looks at you. You look at his stomach. Heck yeah.
You like pickles?
Jaden, how is it going to help you know which person is But you don't know who actually likes pickles. Like in reality. Outside the game.
I know he doesn't like them.
I love pickles.
What is wrong,
Sure.
Jaden? Why are you doing this?
You're
have
a
4
bad
minutes left.
psychiatrist.
You burned a minute on pickles.
Are you wearing a blue sweatshirt?
Come
Take
on,
the
don't
glove.
run.
No.
Are you wearing a blue sweatshirt? Are you wearing a yellow sweatshirt? Do you consider that a sweatshirt?
I know.
Sleep fair.
No one in this room is not wearing shoes, I don't think. Yeah, everyone in this room is wearing shoes. What are you gonna find out, Jaden?
No one
What
here's
is your
We
goal?
all have shoes.
We all have shoes.
But they are wearing yellow sweat. Oh wait, no, that actually works. Wait, are you wearing
sweatshirt at all?
Yes.
Now we're getting somewhere, Jaden.
Are you wearing pants? Spaghetti.
No. Here, ask me a question.
You like I'm sorry, I was watching fights. Are you wearing a wait? Are you wearing a sweatshirt?
Yeah.
You would ask me a question?
Are you wearing a sweatshirt?
Yes.
Are you wearing a sweatshirt?
Yee, brother.
You're
Are you
asking
wearing a
all the
sweatshirt?
people who actually are wearing
sweatshirt?
the
What kind of jacket is a sweatshirt?
Are you wearing a
Hey,
sweatshirt?
my guy.
Is a
Are you
jacket kind of a
disrespecting the
sweatshirt?
teacher?
Well, I don't know.
You messed up it,
Two
Aaron.
and a half minutes on the clock.
Okay,
Are you
well, I
wearing a
guess you don't get my
sweatshirt?
answer.
He doesn't deserve your answer.
Are you wearing a sweatshirt? Yeah. Are you wearing a sweatshirt? Yeah. Are you wearing a sweatshirt? I already asked you that. So I asked you that as well. Are you wearing a sweatshirt?
Me?
No, him.
Yeah, I am.
Are you?
Yes.
We're all wearing sweatshirts.
Diagnosis.
Boy.
I don't have one.
Okay. Well, you do have about 2 minutes left.
You are all wearing sweatshirts.
Good diagnosis. We're still sick.
Right? That's your problem.
People don't get cured once they get diagnosed, Daniel. Come on
That's how psychiatrist works.
now. No.
Are you
That's how
wearing the
psychiatry
opposite
works.
of what you wear?
What?
I can't even answer that question. What is the opposite?
Jaden, what's the opposite of a
I
sweatshirt?
mean,
I'm just gonna revert back to pickles.
No.
Are you wearing a sweatshirt? You say yes.
Psychiatrist.
You say. Ooh. Wait, is that real psychiatrist?
Yeah.
Psychiatrist.
Oh, it's shade.
Psychiatrist.
Okay.
I didn't wear a sweatshirt.
God, I have to ask it.
Like a
Do you like work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andrew,
Yeah,
you're basically the worst.
I know, and I try to be.
So he is.
Jaden, your hint is:
Oh.
is a jacket a sweatshirt?
Oh wait.
I mean,
Okay.
literally the name.
Just making sure.
Are you wearing a sweatshirt?
No.
Are you wearing a sweatshirt? No. Are you wearing a jacket?
Yeah.
Is everyone Andrew?
No, bro.
That is one of your 3 guesses, though.
Are you wearing a sweatshirt? No, are you wearing a jacket?
No.
Are you wearing a jacket?
What's up, bro?
Are you wearing a jacket?
I don't know, Emma.
Shut your mouth. Are you wearing a jacket?
No.
Are you wearing a jacket?
Yes.
No.
Are you wearing a jacket?
But this was a
Oh,
fear.
no.
Oh no! Are you wearing a jacket? Are you wearing a jacket?
No.
Are you wearing a jacket?
No.
Are you wearing a jacket? Are you wearing a jacket?
No.
You're gonna actually kill yourself.
Are you wearing a jacket? Are you wearing a
I
jacket?
know it's not my goals.
So everyone's the answer is no.
That's just-
What are you getting at, Jaden?
The game has changed, Jake.
You
His
have 5
answer
seconds.
was yes.
5 seconds, Jaden. 5 seconds.
I quit.
Alright.
Oh my
All right. Can someone hold up
Can I say
their,
what it
their
is?
magic
I want to
hand
be
for me?
psycho.
I want to see what it is.
It was the person who had Italian hand.
Can I be psycho?
Boy, are you for real? Why wasn't Jade here?
I want to be psycho.
Can we do one more round?
All right. What is the real time?
Do we not have worship?
7:30. We have no worship tonight.
We also have, like,
Can I be psycho? Yes.
And no girls.
God, Daniel.
Actually, I don't want to
Daniel.
be a psychologist.
All right. This will be the last round.
Psychologist.
Daniel, I've never played this game before. Can I be psychiatrist?
Boy.
Caleb, get on out of here. You're
Yeah, I've never played
Dang.
That's
No.
I've never played it.
Daniel. I can't die.
Yeah, but you're asking like a really annoying.
Migration. The geekness.
Boy.
Psychiatrist.
All right.
That's what your mom said.
Psychiatrist. Grab a turn.
Caleb is it.
Psychiatrist.
That's what your mom said.
Let's make it really hard for no reason. Elmo.
All right.
I like it.
Caleb is it. You're
Can we
not
actually
being
play the
Elmo.
opposite?
You're
We
not.
should
How
be
about this?
Elmo.
Let's be the
Elmo.
Let's
Elmo.
be
What?
Let's be the
Water.
I can't even
Justin
hear.
Bieber.
Leon, that's going to break the chair. Please don't.
Can't.
Either
I
sit on
can't.
them or don't use them like that. That
All
will
right.
break
You have a
the
suggestion.
chairs.
Raise your hand.
Sit on them or don't use them.
Actually,
You don't.
no.
Okay.
It's not
Yeah.
serious. Donald Trump.
Anyone else?
I just the person you're left.
Miley Cyrus.
Wait.
We
No,
did
that's
that
not what I
already.
meant. I meant does anyone else have a suggestion
Cardi
that is
B.
not stupid?
Yeah, Cardi B.
Oh, no, I have a good one. I actually have a good one. Daniel, I actually have
Yeah, is it a good one?
Yeah.
How confident are you?
I'm
That's
actually
low.
confident.
Okay, let's hear it.
Whoever's tapping their foot.
6'9".
Ooh, yeah, well, I don't know.
We're
A,
gonna
that's
do
really
that without
hard
realizing.
to keep up for long periods of time, but B, we just did a pass. So
Okay.
like doing another pass might be too easy.
Okay.
Let's be Donald
Wait,
Trump's
I got
wife.
one.
Yes, Nathan?
Okay, I've got a good one. Ready?
For sure.
Whoever is looking down, like with their head, they just stay looking
No.
down.
So it's a pass.
That causes
Yes.
potential back problems.
No
passes.
Let's be 21
Yes.
Savage.
No,
Every time.
don't argue.
Every time.
Disrespect to your elder. That's what I thought.
Like I said,
The next person.
he is your elder.
One question, one move. One question, one move.
I would have a hard time.
Were you held back?
Yeah.
Us as the group will have a very hard time with that. We're gonna be arguing the whole time.
Loser.
Okay, I
I
think for
am.
Caleb and for how much time we have, a good one would be we always answer the opposite of the truth.
That's a
Just-
sin.
Just always the opposite of the truth.
Okay.
Wait, but
And
who are
we don't say
directed upon?
psychiatrist?
Yourself.
And we don't say psychiatrist.
No, of your.
No, you do say second.
Well, if they're wrong, but the odds of you being wrong are basically down to did you forget what we're playing?
And then I've got something to say.
Yeah.
Or
I
I
would
forget.
guess.
Or did you
Because
forget who you are?
You're right.
So this is maybe.
So this is purely about yourself. When he asks you, the answer is always about you, but it is always the opposite of what the real answer
But
is.
what if you don't know? Like, what if he asks if you're male and you don't know?
If you don't know, if you don't know Nathan, is this
I'm
like
sorry, I'm a
Nathan?
napkin.
Are you asking for a friend or for yourself?
I'm asking
All you
for
have to do is
a
like,
friend.
I'm
At school, Nathan makes very suggested comments of being a Fortnite character.
Yeah.
So if yes, are you wearing pants?
What?
No.
Dr.
Hey.
Many have tried, but all have failed. We are
Too
still sick.
crazy, Daniel.
We need more help.
I have a question.
No,
More
they didn't
Classic
fail me.
case.
therapy.
No. Psychiatrist.
I've got a question for you.
psychiatrist.
All right, everybody hush. Everybody hush.
Ah,
It is not your turn to talk until he asks you a question.
What?
All right, group therapy time starts now.
I'll give you a Skittle if you ask me a question. I'll give you 10,000 V-Bucks. You see, this is the problem that we're having. This is what you need to fix.
Hurry, Caleb!
Phony.
And ask questions. You have to ask anything.
Wait, just dab. No, everyone T-pose.
No, I know.
What?
Science!
Robotics class. We created a T-pose circle around your
No! I guess it depends on what your definition of a jacket is.
Yeah, right.
Get out of here. What's your turn for not going over to the next scene?
I went to do it.
Hey man, my
No, you
butt's
didn't.
fatter.
You just decided to just
Hey.
slap him.
Right?
Go.
You're weak.
No.
I watched my Crackle play Fortnite.
Okay, we can
That's backwards.
No, we can't.
Wait.
Is that one of your guesses?
Or-
No.
Yeah, we're all jiggling.
We need
Is that one of your guesses?
No!
Wait.
You're 0 for 2. You have one guess left.
It's game over if you guess again.
No, don't just go for it. You realize what happened?
You've asked like 2 questions.
The first 30 seconds.
One of them was a psychiatrist. You have negative information so far.
Of course, yes.
Am I wearing
Caleb,
a jacket?
ask me if I'm wearing a jacket.
No, ask me if
No.
I'm wearing a jacket. Why did you choose him?
Correct.
Ask me if I'm wearing a jacket.
Are you wearing a jacket?
Yes, I am.
Ask me a
Ask
question.
me a question, I'll give you a Skittle. Wait, that's...
Don't take candy from sane people.
Are you wearing a jacket?
No.
You always go.
Are you
No,
wearing an
I
ankle
lied to
monitor?
you, child. Like my mother did to me.
Ask me a question.
Do you have shorts?
Yes.
You
You know,
Wait, ask me a question.
Don't
Ask
waste
me a
your
question.
guess, man. Don't waste
He's
your guess.
Shorts on. Ask me a question.
Well, ask
Ask
them if
me
they're
a
wearing
question.
shorts.
You haven't
Yeah.
asked me a question.
Ask
Are you
Rex a
wearing
question.
shorts?
He looks interesting.
Amber?
First would just laugh.
Make it one, Caleb. Make it one. Let's not mess
Okay,
this up.
Are you wearing shorts?
Am I wearing shorts?
Am I
Well,
wearing
no.
two pairs?
Are you wearing pants?
Yes, I am.
You are.
Look at these sexy thighs.
No one wants to see that. Everyone besides your mom.
Okay. I feel that I've seen enough already.
Man, I just looked at his
I've
face.
seen too much.
Bro, I just feel bad. I don't want to see. Takes the
Am I
plate.
wearing a jacket yet?
So why?
Wait.
I see your face on my neck.
Ask me a question.
Oh, wait.
Ask
Ask me if I'm wearing a jacket.
Hey, at least you're dreaming about
Andrew,
me.
Andrew, was Andrew wearing a jacket? No, no, you deduced that. You didn't ask him.
No,
Caleb,
ask me a question. Hello, ask people that you haven't asked
You are
yet,
not-
kid.
After.
Caleb, you're discriminating against the
You asked
females.
me about when-
You would ask
You
me
do.
questions.
Yes,
Still, I
you
can't
haven't
see it.
asked. You haven't asked any females.
There's two of them.
We all just died.
We did.
Everyone else in the room.
Um,
Are you wearing
Right, Caleb,
shorts?
you got 1 minute.
yes, I am wearing shorts.
Ask me if I'm wearing.
Hello,
Ask me a
kids
question.
Wait,
Yes,
No,
I
it's
am
so
wearing
good.
shorts.
Ask me
are
a
you
question.
wearing a jacket?
Oh, me?
Are you wearing a jacket?
Ask me a question.
No.
Ask me a question.
Who
So
said
she
what?
is wearing shorts, and
So
she
she
has
said
a
yes to
jacket.
jacket?
She's not wearing a jacket.
She said no to jacket?
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
That's good.
That's good.
Yeah.
Ask another question, boy.
You're considering a jacket.
Wait,
Oh. Wow.
Cursory
me a
glances will
question.
get you every time.
It looked. I don't know. I didn't see the zipper.
Okay, anyways, it wasn't psychiatrist. We're good. Keep going.
He didn't even
Not
listen to
psychiatrist.
any of that.
I know. That was like the most valuable information you
Treasure
got.
trove.
ask me a question.
I'm literally giving you the answer.
Here's one Skittle.
Are you wearing a jacket? No. You're not.
Did you want your one Skittle or not?
Psychiatrist.
I
Yeah,
lied to you
psychiatrist.
again.
Psychiatrist.
I lied to you again, kid.
It's okay, Nate. We still love you.
Wait, we do.
Yes,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sure of it.
Okay, sir.
Oh wait, I mean,
You took my big bottle boy. You
I
don't
mean
get shit.
no.
Wait, so
Well, I'll say it about
Ask me
Boy.
All right,
You're
Caleb, you're out of time. You have one last guess.
No, stop.
This is
Just
it.
one guess.
So most of
Just a
you
guess.
are wearing jackets, and not most of you are wearing shorts.
That's your guess as to what.
No. That's not my guess.
All right, I'll give you one last chance to
Who
fix
said-
this.
Who said
I'll
yes
give you
to
one
wearing
last
a
chance to
jacket,
fix
though?
this. Go down the line. Ask all of us about shorts.
Are you wearing shorts? Are you wearing
Psychiatrist.
Yes, no.
No.
Are you wearing shorts? No. Are you wearing shorts?
Yes.
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 Yes.
Yes. or no?
Yes.
He's wearing shorts.
Yeah.
Are you wearing shorts?
Yes.
Are you wearing shorts?
Yes.
Okay, final guess time.
So
Pizza
only
time.
3 people said they're not wearing shorts.
Which three was that?
It's all division. 3 divided.
Uh,
3
try,
divided
try,
by whoever.
try them again.
You're wearing shorts, right? Are you wearing shorts?
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
He
Are
confused
you wearing
himself.
shorts?
No.
Are you wearing shorts?
No.
Are you wearing shorts?
Yes.
Okay, so these two then.
Thank you. Addition.
Numbers are hard. They
Um,
really are.
Yeah, they don't change.
But there is one thing in numbers that it's easy. Yeah?
All right,
It's
final
2
guess
plus
time,
2
Caleb.
equals
Yes.
fish.
Yes.
Yes,
Hey,
that's
hey,
easy
hey,
to
hey.
know.
only 2 people
No,
in the
not
group
even close.
say
Not.
what the heck?
It was the
It was a good try. It was a good
It
try.
was you said the
You always
honest
give me
say
the wrong
question.
answer.
Say you asked me if I was wearing shorts.
Always
I
give
would
me the wrong
say
answer.
Yep, we're always thinking about
Yes.
Am I wearing-
Yes.
am I wearing
Yes.
shorts?
Yes.
Yes.
shorts.
3 plus
Yes.
3 equals
Shorts.
8.
No. Shorts. No. Shorts. Yes, all the way across. Because they're the only two wearing shorts.
Am I wearing a jacket? No. Am I wearing a jacket now? Yes.
Do you see what he did?
Okay, yeah, I get it.
Beautiful.
I like
All right, well done,
Vegas.
Caleb. Well done. All right,
Oh god.
that is it for games.
What?
We're gonna move into.
I knew that.
Dude, we spent a lot of time on games. I don't know what you're complaining about. 3 rounds. around psychiatrist? It's like
Like,
up there. All right, we're gonna move into study time because we have no worship band tonight.
Come here, boy.
We don't have any
Yep.
worshipers.
Yeah.
No above God anymore.
so wait, what's this
No.
like a worship song?
No.
I
Worship,
got that
worship,
big
worship,
devil.
worship.
Yeah, touch it off.
Bryce! Jaden, migrate!
Make sure you have a Bible.
Migrate! Bryce, we're all gonna be in clumps of chairs. No, it's all clump up.
Prophets.
Oh!
You
You
wanna
know
have those people?
Wait, I'm not a prophet
what? You
though.
know what? Yeah. Will you say you're talking now?
All right. Where you sit is not actually an important issue unless you sit in such a way as to disrupt the group, which you guys are doing. That makes it an important issue. Otherwise, we don't really care who you sit next to unless you disrupt the group. Then it suddenly matters.
Are we not doing small
Don't,
groups?
don't make it such a big deal. It's really not meant to be such a big deal.
What?
What do we always do?
Worship.
The big group,
We don't.
right? We go over
Oh,
here,
okay.
All right. I do love you, Dion. But yeah, don't argue with my leaders. It's not a good strategy. All right, open up to Zechariah.
Oh, it's been a long time.
What? Jada just stole my Bible.
Do you have any proof?
Yes, I do.
How
My proof is my witness.
Bryce, you gotta get a Bible,
Bryce,
man.
you don't have a
gotta,
witness.
you gotta
Bryce,
get a
I
Bible.
am the witness.
Bryce, give me a Bible.
Nathan, you gotta get a Bible, man.
I know.
If
I
you don't
love
have a
that.
Bible, how you gonna read?
Manservants.
I have
You're
one
gonna
of
read,
those.
man.
Aiden.
Luckily, I got
We have any proof?
I've got temptation.
Liars go to hell.
Whoa,
No, they don't.
whoa there, whoa there.
Whoa.
Wait,
I'm a
then
liar.
you're
I
gonna
forgive you
for lying.
I don't give a
Hey Jaden, hey Jaden.
Jaden, you're gonna go to hell if you don't change your ways.
Slow it down, man. Slow it down. Okay, so tonight we're looking at Zechariah chapter 7 through 8. Last week we did 3 chapters. Week before we did 3 chapters. This week we're only doing 2 chapters. How nice.
That is nice.
That's nice.
That's nice and
So
shallow.
So
Shallow.
Take a smaller bite.
Bro,
All right, we're almost to the end of the minor prophets. If you've missed a few weeks or you've been gone for a good chunk, like Hunter here, we've already been through the majority of minor prophets. We're down to Zechariah and Malachi. Zechariah and Haggai were completely different from the other minor prophets because Haggai and Zechariah were written at a different time than the other minor prophets, and then Malachi will be different again because he's written way at the end. So right now what we're dealing with is not the warnings these guys were dealing with. They were warning against that if you don't turn your life around, if you don't turn this whole country around, this 70-year punishment is coming your way. Now we're at Haggai and Zechariah's time after the punishment, and they're basically saying, hey guys, don't repeat the same mistake. Like, you're getting a second shot now. God's bringing you back into your country. God's going to set you back up. If you stay true to him, he's going to set your country up better than it ever even was in the first place. And that's a pretty big promise when you consider the riches of David's kingdom, the riches of Solomon's kingdom. So God's made some pretty big promises so far. We're going to get a little bit more of that tonight as we go through chapters 7 and 8. We're going to do a quick summary review video, and I promise it's not the same as last time because we are going to watch the last part we keep on skipping because we're doing chapters now. Okay, you guys ready?
No.
Nope, not ready?
Nope.
Are you
I
ready?
was never ready.
Slightly ready?
Nope. What are we doing?
More ready than I was before.
I was never ready than I was right when I started saying that.
Get the lips.
Oh gosh, that's actually like really bright.
I can't see.
Yeah, dude, my eyes, they burn.
The book of the prophet Zechariah.
you take
The book is set after the return of the exiles from Babylon to Jerusalem. And we're told in the book of Ezra that Zechariah and Haggai together challenged and motivated the people to rebuild the temple and look for the fulfillment of God's promises. Now, long ago, Jeremiah the prophet had said that Israel's exile would last for 70 years, and that afterwards God would restore his presence to a new temple and bring his kingdom and the rule of the Messiah over all nations. The dates at the beginning of this book tell us that those 70 years are almost up. But life back in the land was hard, and it seemed like none of these promises were going to come true. Why? And the book of Zechariah offers an explanation. It has a fairly clear design. There's an introduction, which sets the tone for a large collection of Zechariah's dream visions, and that's concluded by chapters 7 and 8. And then this is followed by 2 more large collections of poetry and prophecy. Let's just dive in and see how the book works. It begins with Zechariah's challenge to his generation to turn back to God and not be like their ancestors who rebelled and refused to listen to the earlier prophets, which landed them in exile. And so now the returned exiles respond positively to Zechariah. They repent and humble themselves before God, or so it seems. The next large section is a collection of 8 nighttime visions that Zechariah experienced. And just to prepare you, these are full of very bizarre, strange images, a lot like your dreams. The idea that God communicates to people through symbolic dreams, it's very old. It goes back to the book of Genesis. The dreams of Jacob or Joseph or Pharaoh, these gave meaning to current events at the time, but they also gave a window into the future. And so Zechariah has his own dreams now, and they've been arranged in this really cool symmetrical design. The first and the last visions are about 4 horsemen each. They're like rangers patrolling the world on God's behalf, and it's a representation of God's attentive watch over the nations. Their report is that the world is at peace. And in Zechariah's day, this refers to how God raised up Persia to conquer Babylon and bring peace. And so the question now arises. The 70 years of Israel's exile are almost up. Is now the time for the Messianic kingdom in Jerusalem? And God responds by saying that he's determined to fulfill those promises, but he leaves the question of timing unanswered. The second and seventh visions are paired because they're both reflections on Israel's past sin that led up to the exile. So the second vision is about these horns that symbolize the nations that attacked and then scattered Israel, Assyria and Babylon. But then these horns or empires are themselves scattered by a group of blacksmiths, an image for Persia. The seventh dream is about a woman in a basket, and we're told that she's a symbol of the centuries of Israel's covenant rebellion. And then this woman is carried off to Babylon by other women who carry the basket flying with stork wings. This is so strange. The third and sixth visions are paired as they're both about the rebuilding of a new Jerusalem. So a man is measuring the city. It's an image of God's promise that Jerusalem will be rebuilt and become a beacon to the nations who will join God's people in worship. And then the sixth dream is about a scroll that flies around the New Jerusalem, punishing thieves and liars. The idea being that the New Jerusalem is a place that's purified from sin by the scriptures. The fourth and fifth visions are at the center of this collection, and they're about the 2 key leaders among the returned exiles. So Joshua, the high priest, and then Zerubbabel, the royal descendant of David. So Joshua had been symbolically wearing Israel's sin in the form of these dirty clothes. But then those are taken off, and he's given new clothes and a new turban, a symbol of God's grace and forgiveness. And then an angel tells Joshua that if he remains faithful to God, he will lead his people, and Joshua will become a symbol of the future Messianic king. The other vision is about 2 olive trees that supply oil to this elaborate gold lamp, which itself is a symbol of God's watchful eye over his people. And these 2 trees symbolize the 2 anointed leaders, Joshua and then Zerubbabel, who's leading the temple rebuilding efforts. And God says that success will not come to this new temple if it's the result only of political maneuvering. Rather, these 2 leaders must be dependent upon the work of God's Spirit. The visions come to a close with a bonus vision from the prophet, and it picks up the themes of the central 4th and 5th visions. It's Joshua, the high priest again, and he's given a crown and presented as a symbol of the future Messiah, who will also be a priest over God's kingdom. And then Zechariah closes it all out, saying that all of these visions will be fulfilled only if the current generation is faithful to God and obeys the terms of the covenant. And so altogether, these 3 visions emphasize how the coming of the Messianic kingdom is conditional upon this generation being faithful to God, which leads to the conclusion of the dreams. It's another challenge from Zechariah, and a group of Israelites come, and they've been mourning over the former temple's destruction for nearly 70 years. And they ask him, is it time to stop grieving? I mean, is God's kingdom going to come very soon? And Zechariah again reminds them of how their ancestors rejected God's call through the prophets, which led to the exile. And so he challenges them too. He says, this generation will see the Messianic kingdom only if they pursue justice and peace and remain faithful to the covenant. So in other words, Zechariah reverses their question. He asks, are you going to become the kind of people who are ready to receive and participate in God's coming kingdom? And that question is left just hanging there. The people don't answer, and the book just moves on.
That's it. So now we're going to read. Anyone want to start us off? Chapter 7, verses 1 through 7? Anybody? I'm just flipping pages right now.
Oh, it's not big group or small group. It's just youth group.
Alright. Anybody? Chapter 7, 1 through 7? You seem nervous enough. You want to do it?
You seem nervous enough.
Say yes.
I'll do it.
Yeah? Go for it, Hunter.
Okay.
Chapter 7, verses 1 through 7.
On December 7th of the 4th year of King Darius' reign, another message came to Zechariah from the Lord. The people of Bethel had sent Sherezer and Regamelech along with their attendants to see the Lord's favor. They were to ask this question of the prophets and the priests at the temple of the Lord of Heaven's armies. Should we continue to mourn and fast each summer on the anniversary of the temple's destruction, as we have done for so many years? The Lord of Heaven's armies sent me this message to reply. Say to all the people and the priests, during these seven years of exile, when you fasted and mourned in the summer and in early autumn, was it really for me that you feel fasting? And even now in your whole festivals, aren't you eating and drinking just to please yourselves? Isn't this the same message the Lord proclaimed through the prophets in years past, when Jerusalem and the town of Judah were bustling with people, and the Negev and the foothills of Judah were well populated?
Thank you very much, Hunter. That was good. Alright, so we see in this section the dilemma. The people have been celebrating holidays every year just because the temple had been destroyed 70 years ago, and they knew about it. They were still alive. They witnessed it happen, and then they were carted off to Babylon. While they're in Babylon, they made a holiday out of it. But instead of it being a celebratory holiday, it was a holiday of mourning. So it was kind of like if you lost someone close to you, and every year on their birthday made you sad now instead of happy. It was the same kind of thing. The birthday of the temple getting destroyed would roll back around, and the whole nation of people would just be sad. But now they're building a new temple. And the question is, do you still mourn for the loss of the old one? That's an interesting question, because like the new one's not done yet, and the new one isn't the same as the old one. It's not the same temple. It's not like they're putting back together a Lego set. They have to start over from scratch. There's nothing left of the old temple but a pile of ruins. So it's going to be a different temple. And so far as we know from what we've read, it's not going to be as nice either. It's going to be a much crummier temple than the last temple. Solomon's temple was built under one of the richest kings the planet has ever seen. This one is built by a ragtag group of people that aren't even allowed to form a government. That's a pretty big difference. Like, you know, when you can't even collect taxes properly, you don't get a lot of money to put together a big public works project like this. So they're asking, should we still be sad every year when this rolls around? And the answer was, is that really why you have a holiday? Or is it just because it's what you do? Is it habit? You could kind of ask the same question about stuff like Christmas. Does your family actually spend more time celebrating Jesus' birth around Christmas, or more time doing something else? Be honest. What do you spend more time on? Do you spend time leading up to Christmas in preparation for something? Do you prepare for Christmas in some way? And is that preparation for celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ, or is that preparation for something else?
I mean, we all do it for Jesus.
But do you? That's the real question.
I'm opening the presents for Jesus.
So there's a different question that adds on to this, and that's that when you mourn a building, are you even doing something right in the first place?
No.
Does that make sense? Like, you're mourning a building? It's just a building. It's just a building. Now, if you were mourning God losing his house, that would make sense. You're mourning the fact that God no longer has a temple where you can go meet up with him and worship him. That makes sense. If you're mourning the fact that a building got knocked over, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So the prophet says, this is just like before, guys. Just like before. Back before they got sent to Babylon, one of the things they were doing wrong, God told them about, like, hey, stop it, was they had all these holidays. Now, it wasn't a holiday where you mourned for the temple getting destroyed, because it was before the temple got destroyed, right? The temple was still standing, but they still had these holidays, like 4 of them every year. And God gave them the holidays. God set up the holidays. And they would do the holiday thing. Like, you know, oh, it's that day again. I guess we got to do all the things we did last year. And they run around doing all the busy work and getting everything ready and fixing up the fancy meal, and everyone gets together and they celebrate the holiday. And God told them at one point, hey guys, guess what? You're not celebrating me at all anymore. It's all about the holiday for you. It's all about the day. It's all about the food. It's all about the family. It's not about me anymore. And so he just says, God says through his prophets a few different times, point blank, I don't just not care anymore. I hate it. It's kind of mean. It's offensive. It's like if someone threw you a surprise party and forgot to invite you. Wouldn't that hurt if you realized that? That like a surprise party was set up in your name, everyone got together to celebrate your birthday, and then the one thing they forgot was how to get you there. And they're like,
They just left you at the airport.
oh well, I guess we'll just have the party anyways. It is his birthday.
Yeah,
Oh well.
We don't want to waste that cake, man.
I mean, we gotta, right? We're all here. We couldn't possibly. That's kind of how it felt for God. God had a special day set up. He told them all about how to do it. He's the one who invented the day. And then eventually they're still celebrating, but they don't invite him anymore. That's pretty bad. And so he says, that's kind of what you guys are doing now. You're mourning the loss of a building and it has nothing to do with me. So quit it. Just give it up. It's the same message you got before. All right, so I want to ask you guys, does your situation, does your life going well or your life going wrong, does that change your worship of God? Does that affect your worship of God? It does oftentimes, but it shouldn't. Yeah.
I just want to say that, I mean, I don't think it's just not worshiping God where like this isn't the one that like helped everything.
He's the one blessing you. So take that backwards then. If he's the one blessing you, then when everything goes wrong, could you blame him and say, hey, you're not blessing me? Why not? Interesting. Think about that for a second, because this is not a question I'm asking you to be mean to you. I'm asking you guys so you have the answer prepared, so you know the answer. If God is to blame for when things go right, then why isn't he to blame when things go wrong?
Technically, you could blame him for.
He gives us free will.
But technically, you can blame him for like burning down people's houses, or like doing anything, because he could stop it.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. So this is the ultimate big question a lot of people ask, especially who don't believe in God. It really bugs them that Christians would believe in a God who has all power, who has all knowledge, and he still lets bad things happen.
Just because he allows us, it's like allowing your children to do something bad.
Well, okay, sure, but then isn't there a limit where, like, you know, it's not a person's decision that the fire burns down this many acres or that many acres? Couldn't he have just like blown a wind the wrong way and then stopped? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he could do stuff outside free will and make bad things not happen that aren't to do with free will. You know what I mean?
But then in that case, we could just continue to go further, like go a little bit outside free will, then a little more, and then a little more.
Not even free will. He could just save everyone all the time from every accident that ever happens.
But then there would be no need for faith. Or then like no one would have true faith.
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to. If he steps in every single time, then everyone would start to notice. There wouldn't be a need for faith anymore.
Right, but everyone would believe in him though.
Blatantly obvious. Like, here I go, walking along the cliff. Oh no, the dirt slipped out from under my feet, but I was caught by a branch, and a hawk came and picked me up and put me back on the cliff. Like, eventually people are going to start to notice, like, these freak occurrences don't make sense. I shouldn't live every time I accidentally should die. Like, it doesn't make sense. Every car accident, everyone survives? Really? That doesn't make any sense. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And so there is a gap there. But the other side effect of what happened back in the garden, the other side effect of us continually sinning is that we live in a fallen world. That's part of us making bad decisions, even though it's not directly a bad decision that makes 20,000 acres versus 10,000 acres burn down. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Hunter.
So, well, he gave us a choice, though. He gave us a choice that we could do. We could either choose the good choice or the bad choice.
Yeah.
And we often choose the bad.
Right. So this is the question, though: is every time my life goes poorly, is it my fault, or is every time my life goes poorly, sometimes my fault and sometimes other people's fault?
Sometimes your fault, sometimes other people's fault.
So does that make sense? Like,
Sometimes it's no
so
one's
in those
fault,
instances where it's someone else's fault, couldn't God have fixed it? Couldn't God have saved me? Couldn't God have made it go perfect?
but sometimes it's no one's fault.
This is an interesting thing. God has a certain amount of hands-on and a certain amount of hands-off, it would seem to us, but then you have to try and get back into God's shoes, because from God's perspective, he sees the end and the middle and the beginning all at once. And so when he looks like he's letting go to let things happen, he may actually be intentionally allowing something that doesn't seem best to us, but it comes out the best after. And that's one of the ones we almost always miss. Because when something all by itself seems bad, we feel so certain it's bad. But we don't necessarily know what happens after that, and after that, and after that, and after that, and he does. So when he lets it happen, we really have to check ourselves, because it's really easy to slip into. When it's hurting us, when it's horrible feeling, when it's hurting our family, it's so easy to say, this was the worst thing that could happen. Because that's all we see is this moment in time. And it really does feel like, for real, sometimes this is the worst thing that could possibly happen.
Sometimes when you're in like really hard situations like that, it's just it's just really hard to like see what good is to come out of that.
Yes. And that's where the faith comes back into the picture. And so that's why I asked these two questions separately. Do you worship God when everything is going your way? Sometimes we don't. Because sometimes we're built that way. We're the kind of person that only looks to God when we need help. And then some of us are built the complete opposite way. We only look to God when everything seems to be going perfect. So some of us are the please group, and some of us are the thank you group. Some of us are just automatic please, I need help, please, please, please. And some of us are very much automatic thank you, thank you, thank you. And it's really hard to find, for all of us, the ability to do both. Say, please God, please help. I'm not making it. This isn't going well. Please God, please. And to be able to say, thank you God, it's finally like I see the picture, or I see how this was meant to turn out, or I see what you were doing, or I feel that blessing. Thank you. It's really hard to do both. But that's what we're called to do, because we know by faith that God is in each situation. God is there in the situation where it seems like it's the worst possible thing that could happen. And God is there in the situation where it seems like it's the best possible thing that can happen. Job is probably my favorite example of that. Job had what seemed like everything going his way, and he praised God for it. So he was a thank you kind of guy. And then when everything went away, everything was broken, everything was wrecked, everything was horrible, it became very hard for him to keep on praising God. But he did find it. He did manage it. He wasn't perfect at it. But he did say, please, God, please. His please wasn't always, please help me. His please wasn't always a good please. Sometimes it's a really terrible please, like, please, God, would you just stop being mean? Please, God, would you just explain to me why you would do something that's horrible? And sometimes we say the same things. Sometimes we ask those same questions. And God's answer was, do you know everything?
Yes.
Have you, Job, have you seen the whole future laid out in front of you?
Yes.
Hope you know you're being sarcastic, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. When Job was reminded of all that, and when he actually got an answer from God, he went right back into thank you. And his thank you was, thanks God for looking on me, losing my nerve, losing my faith, and dignifying me with an answer. Thank you, God, for answering me, even though I was rude, I was unkind, I was out of line. Thank you, God, for answering me. And that was really cool. Like, God went right past the mistakes Job was starting to make and just said, hey, hold on a second. Wasn't I there for you before? Do you think I've taken my hand off you? Do you think I'm going to forget you?
Yes.
It feels like it sometimes, but the answer was no. Because at the end of the story, Job gets back more than he ever lost. which is pretty cool because only God can pull that off.
I mean,
When you look at what Job got back,
yeah.
only God could have pulled it off. All right, who's going to read the next section? Chapter 7, the rest of the chapter, verses 8 through 14. You got that, Jaden?
No.
Why'd you?
I want 1 through 7.
Oh.
It's so long.
Anybody want to read this? Not the longest part.
I'll do it.
Jaden wants the longest part.
8 through 14.
8 through 14.
Awesome.
Did you do that one?
Wait.
Three small paragraphs.
Then this message came to Zechariah from the Lord. This is what the Lord of Heaven's army says. Judge fairly and show mercy and kindness to one another. Do not oppress widows.
Windows.
It's okay, it's okay. It's widows.
Widows, sorry. Do not oppress widows, orphans, foreigners, and poor. And do not scheme against each other. The ancestors refused to listen to this message. They stubbornly turned away and put their fingers in their ears to keep from hearing. They made their hearts as hard as stone, so they could not hear the instructions or the messages that the Lord of Heaven's armies had sent them, but by His Spirit, through the early prophets. That is why the Lord of Heaven's armies was so angry with them. Since they refused to listen when I called to them, I would not listen when they called to me, says the Lord of Heaven's armies. As with the whirlwind, I scattered them among the distant nations where they lived as strangers. Their land became so
Desolate.
that no one even traveled through it. They turned their pleasant land into a desert.
Nice. Does anyone know what desolate means? It's probably a vocab word for a few of us. Yeah, Bryce?
Like, raised, destroyed, and just like horrible conditions, I guess.
Yeah. Desolate makes some reference to the action or the aftermath of being made empty. Like you stripped it clean. So desolate in this case, in this context, referring to land, would be like not just push the buildings over, but like killed the plants too.
Everything died.
Yeah, which is why
It's like a
later
nuclear
it says
bomb.
they turned it into a desert. So this meant that their country went from green, lush, full of life, not only having the people kidnapped and taken out as slaves, but then what was left was so desert, so dead, that travelers didn't want to go through because they thought, well, I can't make it through that desert. It's so dry. There's no water. There's nothing I could possibly eat along the way. We'll just go around Israel. We won't even go through it. It's that bad. And if you go to Israel today, they can farm, but mostly because of technology. Like mostly because we figured out how to make stuff grow when we want it to. It's not the lush green country that history tells us it used to be. It used to be a country that could support like lions and bears and big carnivorous animals. And that tells you about an entire, what's that called? Food chain. Thank you. An entire food chain that ends with big carnivores. You don't get that in a desert environment. And likewise, we don't get that now in Israel. There aren't bears and lions, and they didn't have to chase them out and kill them. Like, after they came back from that 70 years, the country was never the same again. It was never this green, lush paradise. It was not flowing with milk and honey anymore. So, they're pretty sad, but what he's saying is, I already gave you guys the warning before, and all I ask of you is, what? Did anyone catch it? Because that's my question. Is God asking too much from them? Because his condition... Like, let's make this good again. Let's make your lands just awesome. All you got to do is follow the same thing I asked for before. All I wanted. Not here specifically referring to that. No. In general, yes, it's one of his like standing to-dos, but they're currently working on it. At the point when this is written, they're in the process. So like he's not asking that for that specifically anymore because they're doing it. They're working on it. Jaden?
They refused to listen to his message, and they stubbornly turned away and put their fingers in the ears to keep from hearing him.
Okay. That's how they disobeyed. But what was the thing they were supposed to do? Bryce?
Judge fairly and show mercy and kindness to one another. Do not oppress I almost said windows.
It's easy, right? Because it's on two lines.
Widows, orphans, foreigners, and the poor, and do not scheme against each other.
Okay, so check this list out, okay? Do you think it's too much to ask that judges are fair?
Nah.
That's way too much.
All right. Do you think it's too much to ask to show mercy and kindness to each other,
Yes, that is
Oh, heck yeah.
definitely way
Especially
too much.
siblings.
especially siblings? Do you think it's too much to ask to not oppress widows? He doesn't say don't forget the widows. He says don't oppress them.
Yeah, that's too much to ask.
Oppress.
because-
Don't be an antagonizing force to the widows.
Oppressed. That's like white people to black slaves in America's earlier history. Okay, that's oppress.
Hey man,
That's like
racist.
the Roman Empire moving into a new country and taking it over. That's oppress. Okay? He says, don't oppress widows. You could forget they exist and still not be oppressing them. I mean, you could be pretty bad to them in sort of a neutral way and still not be oppressing them. He's asking you not to go out of your way to be mean to a widow. Don't go out of your way to be mean to an orphan. Don't go out of your way to be mean to a foreigner. Don't go out of your way to be mean to the poor. Do you think that's asking too much?
Yes, because
Okay.
the poor part, the people that are poor, all they do is just like be annoying and ask for money, and that's like
Oh, Dion.
that's annoying.
Yikes.
You actually
So-
went there.
I'm just saying.
Let's assume you're 100% correct. Okay, we'll go off that assumption.
Assume.
Does that mean that you should oppress them? That's my point here. It's not like God is asking for them to create a social, safety net where you prop up everyone and take care of everyone 100%
Well, I
of
mean,
the
if
time.
they're oppressing
perfectly.
you, then you can oppress them, right?
Why? Why would that be the right
They're
action?
oppressing you.
Well, okay. Again, 100%. Like, let's just say you're right. They weren't oppressing. They're widows and orphans and poor people.
Well, poor people are annoying and they will probably
Not
oppress you.
oppressing you. They're not oppressing you.
They will
Dion.
probably oppress you for money.
So oppressing is using like power and authority to keep somebody down. That's what oppression is.
Yeah,
Well, they're gonna
oppress
use-
one.
Right,
That's
it's like-
they're doing the opposite.
They literally.
It's like if I
Can't.
was a leader and I just wouldn't let you come into the room. Say no, Dion, you're not welcome in the junior high room.
Well,
I'd be
that's
kicking
oppressed.
you
You're
out.
not welcome.
Is it
All right,
because my
security
skin
guards,
color?
remove Dion. We're
doesn't
gonna
matter
walk him
why.
out of the building. Like that's
We
oppression.
got this, guys.
Okay? Like that's oppression. Like if I even like just wouldn't sell you something from the snack bar, that's still not oppression.
Oof. You should do
Like
it.
you have to go
You should do
way over the line to make it oppression.
So
You
is
should
it
do
like I will shoot you if you don't?
In some cases,
No.
yeah,
That was back
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
like a little more extreme version.
that'd probably be the, like the
Okay.
far
Yeah,
extreme.
it's electric chair.
But like, okay, so let's put this in the context.
I will put you in prison if you
Let's say that there's taxes, and you said, okay, everyone pays 10% taxes except for widows. They pay 20.
Why would you do that?
I'm not saying you would. I'm saying that's oppression. God's saying don't do that.
But
I don't think that that's going too far. And the fact that he has to say this tells us something else.
Yeah.
It tells us they literally were doing this before.
And
Because what he's saying is, don't do like you did last time. And then he says what they did,
This
that
is
they
like,
needed to
and
stop.
then
Like, judge fairly. Have
And then
fair
again,
judges. That means last time they didn't have fair judges. This time he says, I don't want you to go around without mercy, without kindness for each other. What does that tell you? Well, last time they had no mercy. Last time they had no kindness for each other. And he says, don't oppress the widows, the orphans, the foreigners, and the poor. What does it tell you? That means they were oppressing those people before.
I mean, some of
Now,
these
the
make
way
sense.
they did it was interesting. It wasn't like a governmental widows pay 20%, everyone else pays 10%. It wasn't like that. It was literally that no one was following the rules of how you are supposed to take care of widows. Because God actually had rules of how you take care of widows, how you take care of orphans, how you treat foreigners, and how you treat the poor. He had rules
Tell
on
me
that.
why we don't
So
treat
first off, they ignore that. So then the widows have nothing, the poor have nothing, the orphans have nothing. So they have nothing. So then the people who have nothing go to the rich people who have something to spare, and they say, "Can I borrow money? Like get a loan?" And they're like, "Sure, you can have a loan, 20% interest." Well, I gotta eat, so okay, I'll take the loan. So instead of it being the government saying, "Give us all the money in taxes," it was all of the people who weren't widows, all of the people who weren't poor, all the people who weren't foreigners, all the people who weren't orphans saying, "Sure, I'll lend you money. You can give me this. But then, if you can't pay me, I own you.
I own you.
I own you." This is where slavery was in Israel.
Whoa,
It was
bro.
not. It wasn't a racial thing. It was a, you can't pay me back. ooh, yeah, you're kind of mine now.
Oh.
You know, I do that all the time.
But is it like a
Tell me
debt
why.
certificate
So
where
called-
you can pay it off?
Oh yeah, yeah. If you can somehow pay it off later in time, you can stop being a slave. That's cool. That's good. The other problem was that they were sent off for 70 years. We talked about this last week because they never did Jubilee. They never did the 7th year thing or the 50th year thing where you get to have like a year off, and then every 50 years you forgave all debts. That was like a mandate from God. Every 50 year, every debt is wiped out, just gone every 50 years. So if you have someone as a debt slave and it's like 50 years till the let go, you're still gonna get a heck of a lot of work out of a person who owed you a bunch of money. Like a lot. But the problem is when 50 years is up, if you don't actually do Jubilee, you don't actually let people go,
You're screwed.
that just means people are slaves forever once they're slaves. They never stop being slaves. That's horrible. Because then they're not working to try and pay off their debt. They're just yours. They're just property. And that's the kind of slavery we're more familiar with. And so God says, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't oppress people. Don't be unfair. And have some kindness for people. That's it. It's like 3 things. You should be able to pull that off as a society. Maybe a few people will mess it up, like 1 or 2, but tell them what's wrong. Make them the outcasts.
Stop it, Jerry.
Basically.
You
All right,
already stopped
so
enslaving people.
I don't think God was asking too much. He was just asking them to be nice. Just be nice.
Yeah.
All right, who wants the long section? I forget. Was it Jaden?
Yeah.
All right, Jaden.
It's always
Chapter
Jaden.
8, verses 1 through 17.
Then another message came to me from the Lord of Heaven's armies. This is what the Lord of Heaven's armies says. My love for Mount Zion is passionate and strong. I am consumed with passion for Jerusalem. Now the Lord says, I am returning to Mount Zion, and I will live in Jerusalem. Then Jerusalem will be called the faithful city, and the mountain of the Lord of Heaven's armies will be called the holy mountain. This is what the Lord of Heaven's armies once said. Once again, old men and women will walk Jerusalem streets with their kings, and will sit together in the city squares. And the streets of the city will be filled with boys and girls at play. This is what the Lord of Heaven's armies say. But all this seems impossible to you now, a small remnant of God's people. But is it impossible for me, says the Lord of Heaven's armies? This is what the Lord of Heaven's armies says. You can be sure that I will rescue my people from the east and from the west. I will bring them home again and live safely in Jerusalem. They will be my people, and I will be faithful and just for them as their God. This is what the Lord of Heaven's armies says. Be strong and faithful and finish the task. Ever since the laying of the foundation of the temple of the Lord of Heaven's armies, you have heard what the prophets have been saying about completing the building. Before the word comes, the temple will be dead. There were no jobs and no money to hire people or animals. No traveler was safe from the enemy, for there were enemies on all sides. I had turned everyone against them. But now I will treat the remnant of the people as I treated them before. Says the Lord of Heaven's armies, for I am planting seeds of peace and prosperity among you. The grapevines will be heavy with fruit. The earth will produce its crops, and the heavens will release the dew. Once more I will cause the remnant of Judah and Israel to inherit these blessings. Among the other nations, Judah and Israel will become symbols of a cursed nation. But no longer. Now I'll rescue you and make you both a symbol and a source of blessing. So don't be afraid, be strong, and get on with rebuilding the temple. For this is what the Lord of Heaven's army says. I was determined to punish you when your ancestors angered me, and I did not change my mind, says the Lord of Heaven's armies. But now I'm determined to bless Jerusalem and Judah. So don't be afraid. But this is what you must do. Tell the truth to each other. Render verdicts and reports that are just and will lead to peace. Don't scheme against others. Stop your love of telling lies and you swear on the truth. I hate all these things, says the Lord. Here's another message.
17. You got it. You nailed it. You're done.
Oh, so long.
Also, just curious, who was speaking in that section?
I was.
I mean, like, who was the narrator in this case? Like,
I was.
no.
He's the narrator of the narrator.
Okay. Anyone with a serious answer? Who said all that?
Jesus.
Yeah.
What?
Is it all
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this a troll? Does everyone not get it?
The Lord of Heaven's armies.
Oh, she got it. Well done. It was the correct answer. All right. It's not a true question. It wasn't Jaden. It's the Lord of Heaven's armies.
It was.
Because it said it like 15 times.
Yeah. I love 11, verse 11, where it's like a new paragraph, and you're like waiting for it. It's got to be a new paragraph, so it's got to start out with, this is what the Lord of Heaven's armies say. And then it doesn't. You're like, oh, cool, a paragraph that doesn't have that. And then it's like the second half of the sentence.
And then it says, Oh, Jaden said this.
Yeah. No, it doesn't.
Okay,
So-
I answered your question. I'll answer it.
Yeah.
Okay, so he says, tell the truth to each other, render verdicts in your courts that are just and that lead to peace. Don't scheme against each other. Stop your love of telling lies that you swear are the truth. I hate all these things.
That's it, right there. Don't do the things God hates.
He will not
I'll do the
eat
next
you.
one.
Don't do the things God hates. Boom. I'm going to bring blessing back on your land. Your crops are going to grow. Your people are going to get to walk through the city streets. Now, keep in mind, that didn't seem possible. What does that tell you about the condition of Jerusalem? If it didn't seem physically possible that old people could walk around and sit in squares and that young children could go and play in the streets?
Well, they're autistic. Because
No.
I
I don't even
I
know.
felt like the answer to
I
everything.
don't even know.
I know.
I don't even
Yeah.
know, Dion.
Yeah,
I
where
don't
do
even
you
know.
get that?
How did you get that far away from what we're talking about?
because they.
Nope. Nobody, nope. Nope. That's 5 nopes. Yes.
It's
Couldn't even
because
let
of
me
all
finish.
those things that they weren't doing. Because the people were so bad there that you couldn't go out in the streets safely without someone doing something really bad.
Okay. One
Especially
possible
for
answer. I
Orthodox.
can't say you're absolutely wrong, but I wasn't thinking along those lines. It's not outside the realm of possibility. Anybody else? Why was it impossible seeming that old people could walk the streets and sit in the square and the kids could play
I was
out in the streets of Jerusalem?
Well, because maybe the old people didn't have legs.
No.
And maybe the kids just didn't want to go outside and play.
Anyone else?
I think that's it.
Oh.
Yeah, this town got so messed up that there wasn't a place safe for someone who has a cane, because it specifically mentions canes. There wasn't a place safe for someone with a cane to physically walk.
Oh, because the ground was like so messed up.
So messed up from the buildings being
Okay.
smashed and burned and pushed everywhere. So imagine that in your head. Their capital city, their biggest city, got so messed up 70 years ago, and they've been there for like 4 years, and they still haven't fixed it up to the point where a person with a cane could walk around.
See, I thought
4 years they've been there. And they haven't fixed it up to the point where a person with a cane could walk around. They haven't fixed it up to the point where it was safe for kids to go out and play. That's how bad
Okay.
the city got wrecked. And now, God is saying, I want to fix it for you. I want to make this place good again. I want to make this place not only livable, but enjoyable again. And I know you don't think it's possible. But then God says, but I'm God. Is there anything I can't do? Is there anything impossible for me?
Yes.
For God?
Dying.
Yes.
Lying.
Okay.
Yes, dying.
Lying.
You can't die.
Got any good paradoxes?
Lying.
Yeah, lying,
I've got
dying.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
you can't die.
How about like fixing a city?
He can maybe do that.
He can probably do that. Okay.
Yeah, but
Good.
that's
Glad we're all in agreement. Okay, who wants to read the rest? Chapter
I got it.
18
Me.
through 23.
Me.
Go for it, dude.
Oh! Okay, here we go. This is the funny one. Here's
Oh.
another message that came to me from the Lord of Heaven's armies. This is what the Lord of Heaven's armies said. The traditional fasts and times of mourning you have kept in early summer, midsummer, autumn, and winter are now ended. They will become festivals of joyous celebration for the people of Judah, for love, truth, and peace. This is what the Lord of Heaven's armies says. People from nations and cities around the world will travel to Jerusalem. The people of one city will say to the people of another, come with us to Jerusalem to ask the Lord to bless us. Let's worship the Lord of Heaven's armies. I'm determined to go. Many peoples and powerful nations will come to Jerusalem to seek the Lord of Heaven's armies and ask for his blessing. This is what the Lord of Heaven's armies says. In those days, 10 men from different nations and languages in the world will clutch at the sleeve of one Jew, and they will say, please let us walk with you, and we have heard that God is with you. For we have
Lovely.
Okay,
Okay.
that was a fault because at the end it rhymed for 3 times straight.
Did it really?
Jew, you,
And you. Like,
yeah.
you can't rhyme you with you. That doesn't work.
Yeah, you,
That's
man,
like
it
EWE
rhymes.
or something.
It's like Yu-Gi-Oh.
Okay, so did Israel ever get blessed in this way? The way God described right here. Have we seen this historically? You go back from today, back to when this was written, in like the 500 AD, or sorry, BC-ish stretch of time. Have we seen Israel, have we seen Jerusalem become that city where everyone is dying to go, where people go there and 10 at a time are asking the Jews, what can you tell us about God?
Nope.
In a way, yes.
In what way?
Because there are some people who are curious about God, in which case they'll go to Jerusalem and ask.
I would say that there were some ironic times when this was the case, like during the Crusades. It was ironically backwards from the kind of setup they were talking about, where 10 people from 10 different countries would go together to politely ask a Jew, how might they know God? What can they tell them about God? And then during the times of the Crusades, it was kind of
giant
a
army.
horrible, like a sardonically like backwards representation of that. You've got all these different countries all fighting over Jerusalem, and it's all for different beliefs about what Jerusalem's going to get them, and no one was respecting the Jews. So what does that tell you? That we haven't seen this blessing.
That's my phone.
Yeah, how can you not love that song?
I know, right?
Is it the R2D2 phone?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Cool kid phone. Who is
Ooh,
it?
telemarketer.
Ooh, let's go.
Hello.
Is it Mary Hot Hotels?
Yeah.
Can you please give me some spaghetti?
Hello.
Sometimes they just hang up
They
immediately.
did hang up.
They
They
did
didn't
it?
like that phone call.
I have memes.
They heard your voice and
drunk.
they knew that you were a Jesus fan.
I could tell. So it's the
Darn
Tombra.
Jesus, weirdos.
Tombra.
Got it again.
All right.
Wasted
So
our time.
try and run the logic backwards. If we haven't seen a time where they had this blessing, if we haven't seen a time where everyone was waiting to speak to a Jew, they just wanted to ask them a few questions about God. If we haven't seen a time where their city was held up as being bigger, more important, and greater than every other city, if we haven't seen that time, what does it tell you?
It's coming in the future.
Okay, you could go that far. Yeah, sure.
We're all
God's a
gonna
God
die.
of his promises. Anyone else?
We're all gonna die.
Did you literally say that like all the time?
Anyone?
Just 'cause we are.
All right. Well, in the last section we read, 1 through 17, the question was, how could they receive God's blessing?
Oh, it's 'cause we
And
haven't
the
done that
answer
yet.
was, render good verdicts, in your courts. Don't scheme against each other. Don't like make up plans to get each other. And then don't lie.
What happened in
We
Frank
haven't
War?
So-
done that yet.
If they didn't get the blessing, what does that tell you?
They didn't.
We haven't done that yet.
They didn't do the thing that they were told to do.
I don't think anyone's ever gonna do
And that, I think, is the truest point here.
that. So he
Not
gave us
only-
a trick.
Not only did Judah not do it, not only did Israel not do it, not only did Jerusalem not do it, I don't know if anyone's ever done it.
No, you can't.
I don't know if
Jesus did.
anyone's ever run a country with only good judges. Run a country where no one's taking advantage of people. Run a country where no one's lying to each other. But they had a chance. They had an entire generation that came out of slavery and were handed their country back at God's request. They had a pretty darn good chance when everyone standing there alive had experienced the grace of God firsthand. I think that was about as good a chance as they were possibly going to get. And it seems like every generation they get further from this generation, the ones that had been slaves and then got free, every time they went a generation further, it got a little bit harder for them to do what God was asking for. A little bit harder.
So what you're saying is it's all the first generation's fault.
It tends to be everyone's fault who participates, but the truth of all this is God is still going to make good on the promise. And it's interesting how he's going to pull it off. Essentially what God was saying was, you could be there, be ready, and be waiting for Jesus when Jesus shows up, and all these promises will come true. Or you could not, and none of the promises will come true while you're alive. But it doesn't say that the promises won't come true. It's just like, you won't get them. Someone else gets them. And so when we look into the prophecies, not about this period of time, but the ones about the end of time, then what you start to see is when Jesus comes back that second time, the Jews all go, what? And they realize. They see Jesus, they wake up, they follow him. And when that occurs, they start having righteous judgments. They start having compassion on each other. They start having a community of respect and compassion and love and not lies. And then the next thing that happens, everyone's rushing to Jerusalem. Everyone's holding them up. Everyone looks at Jerusalem and goes, wow, that's amazing. And the reason is not because the Jews did it all on their own. The reason is because they have Jesus as king. That's what makes the difference. And so essentially God was saying all the way back here in Zechariah, you guys want to make me your king right now? You want to follow me like I'm there with you? This can happen right now.
But he knew it wasn't gonna happen, so why didn't he say it in the first place?
Well, here's
Fake hope.
here's that question on the flip side, and this is what Zechariah did. Zechariah basically said, God is willing to hand you everything. Are you willing to do what it takes to accept it? Not fake hope. See, I can know that Jane isn't going to be able to obey me. That doesn't mean I shouldn't tell her what she's expected to do. Still got to tell her what's expected of her. And I have to be ready for her to fail. Does that make sense? Like, if I just don't tell her what's expected, she will fail. There's no question, and she never even had a chance. But if I tell her what's expected, then she at least has a chance.
Well, why would you want to give her?
Love.
Why do you want your kid to succeed? What's wrong with you, Daniel?
The ball's in your court, effectively. Like, you get to do the right thing if you want to do the right thing. Alright, so the reason we learn all this, the reason we study old books like Zechariah, is because all of this applies to you guys too. On the large scale, God was talking to Zechariah to a whole country. On the small scale, God offers you the same proposition. He says, I got a path for you, I got a plan for you, I have a life all laid out that I know is the best path for you to take. And you can walk it, but to do so, you have to come to me constantly. You have to ask God constantly what's his will. Follow what he has laid out for you. You stray from that? Well, then you stray from that. You stray from the plan that he has for you. You stray from the path that he has for you. You stray from the blessings he has lined up for you. Stinko. So this is the same for you as it was for an entire country. God has lined out for you the absolute best, and he already knows whether you're going to succeed or fail, but he doesn't cease to offer it. He doesn't cease to offer it. He's still going to put it out there for you to say yes or no to it. So same for you as it is for a whole country. Isn't that crazy? Pretty cool stuff. All right, that's it for tonight. Anyone got any prayer requests before we go? Anything crazy going on at home? Crazy going on at school? Anything needing prayer in your family? I realize it's a bigger group than usual, but go for it.
My mom's family friends and just good family friends. They both have cancer.
Cute ones. Okay. You can pray for that. Anyone else? Something in your family, something at home, something in your life? It's hard to deal with. Anyone else? Nothing? Okay. Anyone have a friend that they know could use prayer tonight? Yeah. Both? Okay. Good. If you don't want to give details at school, you do, you can.
Oh, I got one.
Just say. You don't have to. It's okay.
She's just going down and not super good.
Okay. We'll pray for Lilith. Yeah.
All my friends because they're not very bright.
Okay. Hey, no, for serious. Like, you need more help when you're not bright. Okay. Anyone else? Nate.
Two. My dad's couple brothers both have cancer. Both out, so the low end staff, so they can't get stuff.
That's crazy. Okay. So, like, a couple that both work with your dad.
I'm going down.
The odds.
Going down by the almost everyone have cancer.
All right. Anybody else?
Nope.
Okay. So just make sure I didn't forget anything. Dion's friends, Nate's dad's coworkers, your friend Lilith, and your family friends, two of which have kids. Okay. I'm reaching my limit. I don't know if I can remember everything. All right. Yes.
I also have one. Friend. Her name is Celine.
Okay.
And she has depression.
Okay. Definitely pray for that. Okay. All right. Is that it? You guys ready to pray? Okay. Cool. Let's pray. I already forgot. I gotta ask. What was your friend's name who had depression?
Celine.
Celine. Okay. All right. Let's pray. Jesus, we come to you tonight with many requests on our heart. And we just ask that you bring them to mind throughout the week so we keep on praying for them. We keep on seeking your will in these things. Lord, we just lift up Celine. Everyone here doesn't need to know the details, Lord, but we know she needs you. She needs some joy in her life. It's the ultimate answer to depression. It's just have an unending source of joy. And so we just ask, Lord, that you would either use Hunter or use someone else in her life to just help her find it. Help her find it, Lord, and to make sure her family's supporting her in this and with her in this. And she doesn't go through this alone. Be with Celine tonight, Lord, and just continue to uplift her. And for Dion's friends, Lord, that you would just move in that whole circle, that you would just breathe some wisdom into their lives. Just cram it in there. Bring them some friends that they don't know now that can help them. Give them teachers that understand them. Give their parents understanding to see what those kids need. And Lord, for Nate's dad's coworkers, that you would maybe even just work a healing in that family. To have two people right there in the same family, both struggling with cancer, Lord, I can't even imagine the heartache that goes on. But Lord, not only to heal those two, but also just to help Nate's dad at work. With two people down, it cannot be easy. And so we just ask, Lord, that you would give him strength, you give him endurance, and that you give the managers or bosses or whoever's in charge there, Lord, just give them wisdom to know what to do and when. And Lord, we pray for Amy's family friends that are dealing with cancer, that you would just work a healing in those families. That you would be there. You would cause peace. That you would show those people in that situation that don't know you, Lord. You would just show yourself to them so they can get to know you. And Lord, we also pray for Lilith, that you would just continue to use her friends that can be good influences as good influences. That you would use teachers, Lord, and parents, and whatever other person you can stick in her path to slow down that direction she's going in. Help her to see exactly what she's about to lose, exactly what she is damaging right now. Help her to wake up. Just be in Lilith's life, Lord. We ask that. And for anyone else tonight, Lord, that needed prayer and didn't think of it quick enough, if you could just be there for them tonight, help them to have peace too. We ask all these things in your name, Jesus. Amen. I love you guys. Have a great night. I will see you next week.
Oh, bucket. Let me win.
Oh,
Not my loss.
hey, save your car.
That's yours, right? Yeah, you.
Yay. Bryce, I got your phone. Did I win? No, you lost.
Me?